Hi everybody! We're going to go ahead and do our work on our cumulative review today as a recorded class, and we're also going to talk a little bit about nonverbal communication. So, as you know, let's go to announcements. This week, you need to turn in your writing assignment, the first writing assignment. I am going to go ahead and give an extension until Monday for everyone. So if the system tells you that you're late, you do get an extension until Monday. I had some people that sent me their material in the last week, and I didn't have time to go through all of the changes immediately. So since some people did send me their documents a little bit later, I'm going to go ahead and give an extension until Monday for everyone to turn in writing assignment number 1. Now for writing assignment number 2 onward, I'm not going to do that. So you're going to need to send me your work a little bit earlier if you want comments on it, instead of waiting until the last week. So we'll talk about writing assignment number 2 in a little bit, but if you want comments, you'll need to send them to me before the last week before it's due, to guarantee getting comments. But this time around, I'm going to go ahead and give everybody an extension because so many people sent in comments in this last week that it took me a little longer to get to them than I'd hoped. So don't forget to turn that in by Monday. If you need to make additional corrections to it, please do. Take quiz 2 on pronouns. That is up and available for you to take now. So take quiz 2 on pronouns. And then you're going to write quiz 3, the cumulative review. So if you look at the course plan, you'll see there's a quiz 3 for week 7, and it is a quiz, but you're not going to be taking it, you're going to be writing it. So I'll give some more information about that in just a minute. Then tonight you'll watch the pre-recorded lecture and lesson on nonverbal communication, writing assignment 2 and cumulative review, and then tonight you'll also get the chance to start your work on the quiz and writing assignment number 2, as well as working on quiz 2. So overview is that there will be you'll be turning in writing assignment 2, taking quiz 2 on pronouns, and writing quiz 3. And then we'll be starting writing assignment 2, which will not be due for a little while, and I'll go into that in just a minute. All right, so cumulative review. What have we learned so far? Well, this is just kind of an overview of most of the things we've learned. We've obviously gone into a lot more detail than this. But if you remember, we started off week 1 with the parts of speech, and we looked at nouns. We looked at common and proper nouns, and with that we looked at capitalization. I gave you that whole list of all the Morson's guides to capitalization, and we talked about capitalizing names, and we talked about capitalizing the first word of every sentence, and when proper nouns being capitalized, common nouns not being capitalized. We talked about collective nouns and how those operate in a sentence regarding subject-verb agreement. We talked about singular and plural nouns. We looked at how to make nouns plural when they end in different ways. We looked at compound nouns. We spent a lot of time also on possessives, looking at singular and plural possessives when you have joint ownership or ownership by separate individuals. And then we looked at the Morson's rules for apostrophes. And we looked at a few situations in which apostrophes can make a plural, but most of the time, almost all of the time, you don't use an apostrophe to make a plural. And then just more recently, we've spent quite a bit of time on pronouns. We've looked at personal pronouns and pronoun antecedent agreement, looking at how the pronoun has to agree with its antecedent in number and gender. And we also looked at subjective and objective case, looking at how the pronoun is used, if it's used as a subject or a predicate nominative, or if it's used as a direct object, indirect object, or an object of a preposition. And then we also have looked at relative and interrogative pronouns, how the words are the same but they're used differently, and demonstrative pronouns, which point out specific things. So that's the majority of what we've done so far and what we've covered. And if you have questions about all the things that we've covered, you can go look back at the PowerPoints and you can look back at the videos. In addition to the grammar aspects, we've also looked at communication. We've covered keywords and why those are important in writing and speaking. We've talked about learning styles and how you can learn more effectively if you know what your learning style is and if you adapt your study skills to suit it. We looked at reading strategies when you have to read for school. How can you read more effectively? We talked about that SQ3R method and active reading, like highlighting things and making notes. We talked about the best ways to write emails and memos. I showed you some emails that I had gotten that were bad and what problems there were for those. And then we also talked about reader-centered writing strategies and how we can write to make sure that our receiver is understanding what we want to say and is more likely to be persuaded to do the things that we want them to do. So in a nutshell, from grammar to communication, this is what you've learned so far. So you guys can all give yourselves a big pat on the back and a big round of applause because you have learned a whole lot so far, and it's only week 7, and we have about half the course left to go. So, cumulative review quiz. So now you've given yourself a pat on the back, and now I say give yourself a quiz. But the cool part about this is you're actually not taking this exam. You are going to write it. But don't forget to take quiz 2 on pronouns. That's there, and that's for you to take now. But you are going to write your cumulative review quiz. So the task is for you to go back and look at all those things that I just discussed, all of the grammatical concepts, not the communication. So we learned the communication and we talked about those, but that's not what you're going to write your quiz about. You're going to look at these things over here. We're going to go back and you're going to go back through the PowerPoints and back through the book and back through Morson's, and you are going to write a quiz for your classmates. What does that quiz have to look like? Well, you need to have 5 multiple choice, true, false, or matching questions. So no essays, no fill in the blank. And they have to cover different concepts from weeks 1 through 6. So each one of your questions has to cover a different concept. Obviously, you can't cover all of the concepts because you're only writing 5 questions, but each one of the questions needs to cover a different concept from weeks 1 through 6. So don't write all, obviously you can have 2 questions about nouns, but don't have 2 questions about possessives. Don't have 2 questions about possessive nouns. You can have 2 questions about pronouns, but make sure one is maybe about pronoun case and the other is about pronoun antecedent agreement. So make sure that you're not asking, what I don't want you to do is go back and review just one area and write 5 questions about that area. So they need to be different. And one of the 5 questions needs to be based on one of Morson's rules. So you can go back and look at the ones that we've discussed in class and pick one of those. So questions have to be good questions, which means they can't be overly simple and they can't be irrelevant. So a bad question would be, what letter does noun start with? And a bad question would be, in week 1, what instrument did Miranda say her oldest plays? So that's irrelevant. Maybe something I said about my family to try to make an illustration is irrelevant. And then the first question is way too easy and too simple and doesn't really test on the material. A good question would be, which of the following is the correct definition of subjective case? And then you'd have multiple definitions listed there. Or you could even have a true-false question. This is the definition of subjective case, or subjective case is, and then you could define it. Okay, so you need to submit your cumulative review quiz to me by April 18th at 11:59 p.m. That is a week from today. And you should email the 5 questions and answer key to me at my email address. So you do need to have the 5 questions and the answer key. This is a quiz grade. You're getting a quiz grade for this. So you need to make sure you follow the criteria. That means questions have to be good questions, like I just explained. If you're not sure if it's a good question, or maybe if you're not sure if 2 things are too similar, then please feel free to ask me and I'll be more than happy to help. The quiz has to be complete for you to get credit. You need to write all 5 questions along with answers for each of them. And it has to include the type of questions I requested. So if you do an essay question or fill in the blank or some other kind of you have to record the answer type question, I'm going to turn that back to you. I'm going to say please only use the types of questions I asked. Questions need to cover only the grammar topics, not the communication. And questions should not be obscure. So don't play the I'm going to try to stump them game. I don't know, some of you guys probably thought that when you were in high school, your teachers were playing that I'm going to try to stump them game with you all the time. And say something like, what was the first word on page 364 in your textbook? That's not what I want you to do, okay? Don't find an obscure exception to one of Morson's rules that is not, very commonly used and write a question about that. the goal here is to help you and your classmates learn, because later we'll be using some of these quiz questions too. So make sure you pick questions that are really going to assess the things that we've learned about so far in the 6 weeks and now 7 weeks that we've been together. So questions should not be overly simple. That doesn't mean just don't write simple questions like I said in the previous slide, but it means that some of your questions should probably be broader and then some of them should be more specific or harder. So that means that, just like on any test, you have some tests where the questions are pretty easy. What is a noun? Well, that's a legitimate question, but you can't have, what's a noun, what's a pronoun? If you have all these questions that are really, really simple, then I'm going to turn that quiz back to you and say, you need to work on this a little harder. On any quiz you guys take, some of the questions are going to be broader and a little bit easier, and then some of them are going to be more specific and a little bit harder. So make sure that you have a good mix of questions. Your answer must be correct to get credit. So make sure you understand and know the answer for sure to your question. At least one question must include an original sentence in need of correction. So that means you'll have a sentence and it'll be like a multiple choice. It could be a true-false. This sentence is correct, true or false. Or probably a better option is to do a multiple choice where you have a sentence and say, okay, here are 4 options. Which one represents the corrections for that sentence? So one of them at least one needs to be one original sentence that you've made up, not one you found from Norson's, not one that you found from the book, that utilizes grammatical concepts in some way, and then you have solutions or choices for which one is correct. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, let me know. So you will complete this cumulative review quiz and you'll email it to me by next week, and then that is a quiz grade. So it's a chance not for you to show me what you know, not through taking it, but to show me what you know by not only having the answers correct for these questions you'll create, but also showing me what's important by which things you select to focus on. All right. So we're gonna segue a little bit then from the quiz and the grammatical aspect to the nonverbal communication, and then we'll get into talking about writing assignment number 2. So this week we're looking at nonverbal communication, and that can mean a lot of things. I mean, it can mean the gestures that you make. It can mean the way you maybe touch people or don't touch people while you talk. It can mean the way that you. Excuse me. It can be the tone of your writing. So today I really want to focus on voice and tone, especially in writing, but also in verbal. So many of you have probably had parents that have said, don't use that tone with me. If you haven't, then you must have been an angelic child, or maybe your parents just didn't, they're one of those parents that didn't discipline you at all. So because I know that I heard that don't use that tone with me lots of times growing up. And we all know what that meant, right? That our tone was disrespectful in some way. Our tone was rude somehow. And sometimes we meant it. Most of the times we probably meant it. Sometimes we didn't mean it, right? But you heard your parents use that word probably. And now you're probably used to maybe encountering people in situations where you're thinking, was that supposed to be rude? That sounded kind of short. That sounded kind of rude. So is this really rude, or is that just the way they talk? But that's this idea of tone. And when we get into writing, we see tone also throughout our writing. Sentence structure, word choice, punctuation, and content. These can all help to work together to create the tone of the piece. What is the emotion or feeling behind the piece? Voice is similar to tone, where you also see word choice, content, sentence structure, punctuation. But also voice is kind of your uniqueness. So what is it about? Not just the tone of I can write in my voice, and my voice can be happy and excited, and then my voice can be critical and serious. My voice is my unique characteristics that I bring to the writing, and I can change the tone of my voice. Just like, think of it verbally, just like, you can call me on the phone, and if I talk to you on the phone enough, I'm going to start to know your voice. So I'll pick up the phone and I say, oh yeah, hi, it's Joe. I know it's Joe, whether or not Joe's angry or whether or not Joe's happy and excited. So that's voice and how it's similar but not 100%. It's similar to tone. And there are some people who will use the terms tone and voice interchangeably. But as this writing scholar, as someone that's been a writer and a writing scholar for many years, I do not believe that those two things are the same. I believe they're different, as I told you. But what I really want you to focus on right now is tone. Because in verbal communication, we know inflection, word choice, timing. You say something really fast. Hey, do you want to come visit me tomorrow? No. Well, that maybe they're no. Do you want to come see me tomorrow? Yeah. Is different than, do you want to come see me tomorrow? Yes. Right? So one of them is like, oh, I guess. There's nothing else better to do. And the other one's like, I absolutely want to come see you. Like, that is the first thing on my mind. So that's in verbal communication. In written communication also, we need to work on cultivating tone. And like I said before, we do that through sentence structure, word choice, punctuation, and content. And it's very important in business writing to cultivate an effective tone. Because if your tone is rude, if your tone is short, if your tone is not businesslike, then there can be serious repercussions. And we looked at that email of the person that I fired and analyzed the tone there and identified that the tone was problematic. It was not very respectful. It was not very professional, and so that person ended up not getting a contract renewed. So we need to make sure in business writing we do have a tone that is professional and a tone that is helpful. And a tone that fosters goodwill. And so how do we do that? Well, you can do that with the punctuation choices you make, with the content choices you make, and with the sentence structure you make. If you have a sentence that's punctuated every word, I, period, said, period, no, period, that's going to be read a lot different than, I said no, right? There's an emphasis. When we're using those staccato periods like that. So that's an example of punctuation impacting the tone. I think in this class, maybe it was in this class, maybe it was not, maybe it was in a different class, we talked about the exclamation point. And if I say, don't run out in the street. Don't run out in the street, period, could just be like our rules. One of our rules, don't run out in the street. And if I say, don't run out on the street, exclamation point, my tone there is very panicked, whereas my tone is very dry and monotonous and providing of rules in the previous example. So tone in writing is important, and punctuation, content, sentence structure, and word choice are all the things that help us develop a strong tone. As I graded Essay 1s, I saw a lot of you guys are really, really developing a great tone. Brian's is the one that jumped out to me as very sarcastic and very funny, and it was a great tone. And then, who wrote about open-mindedness and kind of the connection between your thoughts and your actions? Maybe it was Kelly. But that tone was very philosophical. It's like I was listening to a book about personal development on the way to my office today, and it was very soft and very philosophical. Lots of long words, lots of long sentences. It's a very thinking-oriented book. And Kelly, you did that well with your tone in writing about a piece that subject matter required that. So you did an excellent job. So I've seen a lot of growth, and I've seen a lot of demonstration of excellent tone in this class so far. Now we're going to get the chance to practice it again. So writing assignment number 2 is going to be focused on cultivating the appropriate tone. So this is the situation. You're working freelance and you're transcribing audio from meetings held between your client, who is an investment agency, and its potential partner, which is an insurance firm. You work from home. Your supervisors are very professional, very deadline-driven, very results-driven. It's a very professional environment. The process for obtaining the audio, what you have to do is that you have to go to the insurance agency and get the files from them. Then you transcribe the files and then send the written material to the investment agency. Now, when I say go to the insurance agency, that means email them and get electronic copies of the audio. You're assigned a project on April 12th, and you look at it, and you've done this long enough to think, that's only going to take me about 2 hours. I'm so sorry, guys. Sleepy today. And so you block time on your calendar to complete it on April the 17th. So on April the 17th, you sit down to the file, and you realize that the insurance agency has sent the wrong material. It's the day before it's due. So you have to get the right file. But you don't want to draw attention to the fact that you started the project so late. You also need to be careful because there's a potential merger in progress between your client, the insurance firm that you represent, and then the investment agency that they're working with, from whom you have to get the audio. So how do you solve the problem? Well, what I want you to do is write an email. You're going to either choose the investment agency or the insurance agency, and you're going to solve the problem. You're going to somehow get the audio. You need to demonstrate command of an appropriate tone, though. This is a situation in which tone is going to mean everything. So exceptional grammatical skills and formatting proficiency, which means that you need to format the email effectively according to how we talked about email formatting before. I'm not grading you on the answer to your solution to the problem, just on your writing. I'm giving you an interesting problem in which you really need to practice your tone use. So I am grading you on your effectiveness in writing. So you're going to write an email and you're going to solve the problem, and that is your writing assignment number 2. So you want you to focus very much on cultivating the right tone, and then we also need to work on making sure that your grammatical elements are absolutely correct. This time, if you want my feedback, this is due in week 11, May 7th, which is after break even. So you get a whole break week. I need those to be submitted to me by the break week in order to get feedback. So please submit them to me on or before the break week, and then I can do feedback for you by the end of the break week. So obviously, if you submit them to me sooner, I'll get feedback sooner. But I need to have them by the break week. All right, guys. Well, that is the end of today's the lecture part of today's class. Oh, one thing I do want to remind you, there is an excellent resource that you should read. It is on your class. You have to read it. It's on your class site. It's on your course site for week 7. It's a Purdue OWL link that talks about tone in business writing. Lots of good examples, and it will really help you on the writing assignment. So what should you be doing now? Well, you should be taking your quiz 6, or not quiz 6, you should be taking your quiz 2, since that's what you had extra time to study for last week, and that's what we've been practicing in terms of pronouns. Then you should be writing your quiz 3 and sending those into me. And then finally, you should start working on writing assignment 2, which is going to be due after break in week 11. All right, if anybody has questions, please feel free to email me. I look forward to talking with you guys again soon, and good luck with the quiz you're taking and the quiz you're writing. I'll see you all soon.